Majora's Mask's opening is simply genius, not so much from a design perspective and how it introduces you to mechanics, though it does do that well enough, but from how it subverts expectations and what a video game can be thought of as being, and how it immerses you into its world. But to talk about the beginning of Majora, we have to look back to the actual beginning, its predecessor, to understand what makes it so special to begin with. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is a fantastic game, in part because of its camera systems and dungeon design, but also in terms of its world and themes. It taps into monomythic archetypes that have worked for centuries and here are perfected for its audience. We learn of a darkness creeping upon the land and a call to adventure in the form of Navi the fairy. Link obtains his first weapon, a sword, and overcomes his first challenge, in which the wise old father dies, leaving Link to ally with the princess of the land to keep the evil at bay. It sounds familiar because it's preying upon archetypes every one of us are familiar with. The monomyth has been studied as early as the 1800s and is an attempt to uncover all the commonalities found in classic storytelling and legend. While Ocarina doesn't adhere perfectly to the structure of a typical monomyth, it does have all the elements in place. The symbolism found in Ocarina reinforces this. For example, the sword being symbolic of adulthood, the Arthurian legends of old, the massively influential Star Wars based heavily in monomyth, and bits of Disney's Black Cauldron also steeped in monomythic lore. They all have swords as being symbolic of adulthood. The hero desires to do good and is able to do so only once he has the power to, and this is embodied in the sword. The sword is a symbol of power to lead to adulthood. In Ocarina, this is no more evident than in the Master Sword, the ultimate symbol of adulthood and agency. Link, and in extension the player, has to go through what monomythic scholar David Adams Leeming refers to as a death and resurrection, where Link has to give up his childhood in order to do good in the world. This kind of sacrifice is relatable to any adult who yearns for a return to simpler times, but understands it's their duty to give up comfort and stability, to do what's right for society, to become an adult. On the same level, I think it's relatable to kids who idealize that sacrifice and wish for greatness. Of course, the hero doesn't actually have to go through this in the end, and is rewarded by Princess Zelda, who returns Link to the past for all that he's done. We've come full circle in a monomyth, returning to where we began after a gift from the goddess. These monomythic elements are what makes Ocarina of Time's narrative relatable, powerful, and timeless. It's all freshened up by the fact that it's in a new medium, being a video game. Ocarina is, in my opinion, the definitive Zelda coming-of-age story, and is much stronger in communication of these themes than previous Zelda games. Majora's Mask, by contrast, is hailed as the black sheep of the franchise, yet is bar none the most fascinating entry. It seems less interested in telling a straight monomyth than subverting it and recontextualizing it. In a typical hero's journey, there's a return of the hero from his adventure to the status quo in equilibrium. In Ocarina, that's implied, but Majora begins by shattering those expectations. Link didn't find peace after Ocarina of Time, but instead is continuing to search for Navi, his call to adventure. This isn't like other video game sequels where the hero comes out of retirement to take on a new mission. No, Link wasn't allowed to rest. Once we get control, we find that Link is able to do cartwheels in midair now, a new animation to show his progression from Ocarina. It feels amazing and it's meant to. We also have access to a sword right away, and some plants to tear apart. The game trusts us immediately instead of having the gradual learning curve Ocarina presented us with. But before we come to grips with any of it, everything is taken away from us. Our horse, a symbol of freedom, the very same horse that kids who booted up Ocarina dreamed of riding across Hyrule's massive fields, is stolen and is presumed to be murdered. Our sword, our symbol of agency and adulthood, and our cartwheels showing our progression as the hero, gone, and we're transformed into some Deku scrub. The Deku scrub was the very first enemy the player had to fight in order to progress in Ocarina. You can avoid the Deku Babas and the Skulltulas, but to progress, all players will need to have fought the Deku scrub. We are reduced to the most basic of enemies. It's meant to come across as demeaning, and it works brilliantly. When we arrive in Termina, it's a warped reflection of our collective memories of Ocarina of Time. Everyone here is familiar, but treats Link like a child, not even worth their salt. You can't buy from shops, you can't leave the town. Most adults won't even tell you anything useful, and will even ignore you. The feeling of helplessness and infantilization is maddening, especially having risen above all this in Ocarina from the very start. People doubted you in that game, sure, but you always had a chance to overcome those doubts. Everyone in Termina, by contrast, ask where your mother has gone off to. Nobody will even consider that you might be somewhat valuable to them. Helplessness is further reinforced in the kinesthetics. You don't move particularly fast. You can't jump particularly far. You can't do much of anything but blow bubbles, pirouette, and fly using flowers. Through its game feel, it's actively making you feel childish. To make matters worse, the game slaps on a 3-day timer and demands that you solve an impossible problem in your current state, defeat the Skull Kid, the guy who initially screwed you over to begin with, and stop the moon from crashing into the earth, all without the ability to save, mind you. Your only salvation is help from other children and a handful of adults who are willing to connect to you. Majora's Mask's intro terrified me and leagues of other children who play it, so much so that it's a meme now. Even as an adult, I can really reflect on the existential horror of disempowering you and turning the expectations of the hero's journey on its head. We've come to expect certain things from Zelda, that there will be a call to adventure, not one that we'd be seeking out to begin with, that we'd have a sword to fight off evil, save the princess, and be recognized for the hero that we are. But there's no princess. No clear way of fighting evil. Nobody sees us as the hero for which we want to prove that we are. This is why Majora's Mask has such a unique first level. It makes you feel something, not through amazing and empowering gameplay mechanics like in Devil May Cry or Bloodborne, but by contrast and juxtaposition. By taking away those elements and making the gameplay disempowering, it gets you to feel dread, and as the game begins to empower you by returning Link's human form and giving you the Goron Mask and the Zora Mask, they're still informed by this first chapter. Analysis videos on YouTube have already talked about the game being representative of death anxiety, and I agree with that interpretation. The 3-day cycle, the frame closing in before the start of a new day, it's all about death encroaching. Even just by how many times Link directly encounters death in this game, it should be pretty obvious that it's a major theme. But by showing you how it feels to not be able to do anything to help, you are relieved and thankful that you can in the rest of the game. Majora's Mask was the only Zelda game that focused on side quests until Breath of the Wild, and that's an open world game, and I think here it's a little bit more deliberate. Doing as much good before our death, before the moon falls, is what leads to a positive sum outcome. The Fierce Deity Mask is much like the Master Sword in Ocarina of Time. It's a symbol of our coming of age. They even reuse the Ocarina of Time model for adult Link to communicate this. We get to be an adult only when we've gone out of our way to help others. This is optional, and in contrast to Ocarina of Time, where you're made to pull the Master Sword to proceed with the game. Everyone has to do it there, but in my life, I've seen so many people well into their 20s still not finding independence or realizing that helping others helps you in the long run. Being an adult is very much a frame of mind and not a given attached to age. Majora allows the player to finish the game without, metaphorically speaking, becoming an adult. You have to earn that title, just like in real life. There's no prophecy that says you are entitled to it. You only feel powerful the more responsibility you take on. You get back more from others the more you do for them. In this way, I think its message is more powerful than that of Ocarina's, at least within the confines of communicating itself through gameplay and quest design. Here's a quote from an interview about the game that resonated with me. You could say that Koizumi slapped his worldview on the whole thing. Ha ha ha! I put in everything I've seen in my 30 years on this earth. It is a very serious game. Ha ha! I think this quote proves that they were putting a lot of thought into it. These are adults who are putting everything they have into this game, communicating what they wish they knew as adolescents to children. I believe Majora's Mask is the most thematically rich Zelda game and probably one of the best games ever made. The way it subverts expectations by taking away agency and power is unique among its contemporaries, especially within the monomythic structure, and I hope that you'll have a little bit more appreciation for this gem replaying it. There's a lot more to uncover thematically. I've been hit with a few copyright strikes related to my anime videos, and I have to rethink what I'm going to do to keep a constant flow of content. Making this channel something more focused on multimedia is definitely a good direction for now, and I think I'll be covering everything from anime to movies to games from now on. This video was brought to you by my patrons, Angelica Rivera, Thanatos388, Lucia S., Jaron R., Angel Louis Ruiz, and Honest Phil. And without you, I wouldn't be making these videos, so thank you so much, and look forward to my next video, which will be about Yowie. GoatJesus out.